everybody, welcome back. In this video, I'm looking at the MLB slate. This is the final video of the day, third and final video. Got the other two posted already, so check them out if you want. We're looking at the 6-game MLB slate for tonight on DraftKings and FanDuel. Looking back at yesterday opening day, hopefully you guys made some money. We had a nice Royal stack going late, but Castillo ruined the whole day. I got a lot of tilts because of Castillo's first inning performance, and then he kind of just continued to get worse in the third inning. And then I thought the day was over, and then of course the Royals start to go off late in that game, and we ended up falling just like 5 points shy in double ups on DraftKings, and like FanDuel actually cashed in some of the cash games, but I felt like 10 points shy with a -14 from Castillo and a -15 on DraftKings from Castillo. Put up 100 things, put up like 99.8 with Merrifield was there, Soler was a great play, Carlos Santana was a nice Royals 3-man stack. Definitely a bit tilting. Let's hopefully today goes a lot better. So let's get into it. As always, appreciate you guys to the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Just got to get the pitchers right, and the bets hopefully will do their thing. So let's get started by looking at some of the totals of the day. We have the first game starts at 7 o'clock. We have two teams with a sub 4K or 4-run total. 3.8 for the Rays against Pablo Lopez, and a 3.8 for the Marlins against Yarbrough. Out of these two pitchers, I would lean to Pablo Lopez. He's only 7K, so he's like $1,300 cheaper. We know sometimes the Rays like to go with like some opener stuff, or they don't like to let their starters go very deep, as evident in the World Series. So I'd rather go take some saving than go with Pablo Lopez. Looking at the team, he does get to face some lefties, but there's like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about 5 righties in the lineup, and he gets to face off against the pitcher, so that's always a plus. And then the Dodgers looking like the best stack of the slate going up against Sensatella. Looking at Sensatella's numbers, he doesn't strike people out. Late IQ from Roto Grinders here, we can see that last year he just had a 13.5% K rate, which is well below league average. He gave up a 4.73 xFIP. And looking at this Dodgers lineup, you get a lot of guys that make some great contact, especially looking at the pitch types. It's a lot of fastball stuff from Sensatelli, throws that over 50% of the time, and you got a 300 ISO for Mookie Betts. You got over 200 ISO for the entire team except for Gavin Lux. You got a couple of 400 plus ISOs in there for Will Smith and Max Muncy. And then he throws his slider as the second most pitch. And you have still Bellinger mashing that pitch, Will Smith mashing that, Mookie Betts crushing that pitch. So you got to love the Dodgers stack today. I think they have to be at the top of the list. I like the White Sox as well, going up against a guy like Andrew Heaney, who's a lefty. This is one of the best right-handed power teams in baseball. Last year, they were the best, I believe, in baseball against left-handed pitching. You have Tim Anderson has unbelievable splits against lefties and righties. Jose Abreu mashes lefties. You have Grandal is a good lefty hitter. Robert is a great lefty hitter. So they are going to be a team that I get to a lot of. Some cheapies in here as well. At the bottom of the order, you got Andrew Vaughn, $2,000, their top prospect. Anytime I get a guy that's min-priced and you can play him in 2 spots, you got to have some interest, lefty-righty guy that does have power. So we pull up some of his data just to get to know him a little bit better. He is their top prospect, 14th overall in baseball. He has a 60 out of 60 raw power, so guy has a ton of pop. He's going to get a lot of playing time this year just because of Eloy Jimenez's injury, unfortunately. Looking at some projections for him, the bat, steamer, they all have him projected to hit around close to like the steamer has him low, but the bat has him about 246. The other Zips projection has him to hit 13 home runs this year. So he's a guy that does have power in the minor leagues. He had over 400 slugging. He had only a 3-game sample, but he had a 933 slugging. He doesn't strike out at a high clip either. So you can definitely go with him as a value play. I'll plug him in the outfield for now just to get a guy that gives you a ton of pop. Or maybe even first base for now. We'll see where we end up with. But a guy that does have a lot of power, getting at min-price. Other guys that look appealing in the next game, well, actually on the Angels side, you can look to Trout, Upton, Rendon as a mini stack against Keuchel. Keuchel is not a strikeout pitcher. But especially a guy like Upton, he's super cheap if you wanted to go to some savings here. He looks like a guy that you can have some confidence in. He did have a really good spring training. The next game, you have the A's against the Astros. Not the best, obviously one of the worst parks to hit in, especially at night. The A's have a 4.4 total, but I'd rather take the White Sox over them. So I'm not too interested, except for going with some like value plays in like a Laureano at $3,600 or a Mitch Moreland or a Jed Lowry. I don't see myself paying over 5K for Olsen or Chapman on this slate. The Padres look to be another great stack. They're always appealing basically every single game, just with how powerful this lineup is. We got Will Myers, $4,900. He is pretty expensive, but he's been doing. He's had a great spring. He had a home run yesterday. I would definitely still probably go with Pham just to get some savings. But if you wanted to go with a guy that does have a ton of power, go with Will Myers instead. But Cronenworth is cheap. Machado, Tatis, their team put up 9 runs yesterday. It wasn't really because of them, but hopefully they get back on track tonight. It's just baseball. You're gonna have those days. You're gonna have like a couple days where guys don't hit. It's just the game. But I like both of these guys to maybe get it back on track. And then the final game is one that I won't have too much interest in, except you can look to a couple of like one-offs on the Mariners side with like Taylor Trammell at $2,200, Evan White as a cheap center or a cheap center, a cheap first base option, and maybe Fraley at 2,300. But on the Giants side, I really don't see going nuts or going too crazy with that team. You have like Evan Longoria, Flores, Solano and even Slater as a low-owned stack you could go with, just because they all have really good numbers against lefties. But I do think Kikuchi is in play tonight, so I think I will pass on that. The DraftKings pricing here, at the pitching options, you have Bauer and Blake Snell as your 2 most expensive options. Bauer is in cores. Obviously, that's a downgrade. But I think you can make an argument to go with Bauer if you wanted to, but I like Blake Snell a lot. He's going up against this Arizona Diamondbacks offense, which did have a good game yesterday, but they're still not that powerful, not that scary. They strike out at a very great and a very high clip. He does get some lefties in there, but it's a lot of switch hitters. But it doesn't really matter for Blake Snell. He's just a great pitcher against both sides of the plate. He had a tremendous spring training. He had give up 0 runs the entire spring. Had 13 Ks and 14 innings. He's a guy that is going to do some great things for the team this year at a good price tag in the best, basing off, basically the best spot of it. Any of these pitchers, like I don't want to play Keuchel at 87. I don't want to go with Yarbrough. So he just gives you a ton of upside. It's really him and Bauer as the 2 pay-up options that you can choose from. And then I think I probably can go to like maybe a Pablo Lopez or maybe a Luzardo. See how he's been doing. He's been actually not the best in spring. Gave up like 6 runs in 10 innings. So maybe you can look to some Astros if he's still kind of struggling. He does have a ton of upside, but it's obviously not the best spot against Houston. They have a lot of guys that hit lefties really well, even though there is no Springer. I will go ahead and just put in Pablo Lopez for now. I think he's in a great ballpark to pitch in, obviously Miami. He's a guy that does get you some strikeouts. He had over a strikeout per inning last year. He has had a solid spring training. Not the strikeouts were a little bit down in 13 innings. I just had 9 of them, but only 1 walk, which is great to see. He had a 24% K rate last year. And it's just a spot where Tampa has a low total. I'll definitely take a shot and go to a cheaper pitcher as an SP2 so I can pay out for some bats. So first base is basically Vaughn as a cheap option that will allow me to get to some of the Dodgers bats that I want to. Catchers, you can go to Will Smith. He's the top spend-up option at the board. You can go cheap in the value range for like a Tarantini, $2,900. Maybe you can look to a $2,400 for Tom Murphy against Johnny Cueto. First base, if you wanted to go all the way up, it's for Max Muncy. It's for Jose Abreu. If you wanted to go cheap, it's for Vaughn at $2,000. You can't go any cheaper than that. And then in the mid range, in like the mid value range, it's Jesus Aguilar, $3,300 for him. He's had a torrid spring. It's against a lefty. Aguilar mashes lefties. So if you wanted to go with a different approach at first base, you can go with Aguilar. You probably won't get that much ownership at all. So Aguilar as a value play, Vaughn as a value play, and then it's basically going up for a Muncy or an Abreu. Second base, it's Gavin Lux, $4,100 is probably the most expensive I go. I don't want to go 56 for Altuve or 5K for Brandon Lau or 46 for Fletcher. So it's going to be Flores, maybe at 3,700, Ketel Marte, potentially if you wanted to go with him, just because he hits lefties really well. It's just a one-off play, even if you do happen to go with Blake Snell. You can go with Solano. He hits lefties well, $3,200 against Keuchel. And then that's the main guys. At the cheap end, I don't really see anybody right now. Maybe we'll get a guy starting at the top of the order. Third base, it's Machado is probably my favorite spend up, and then Turner is the second guy I'm looking at. Then it would be probably Bregman, Rendon, Chapman. Better rank the top end guys. I like Moncada, but he's better against righties and lefties, so I'll probably look elsewhere. And then you have Longoria, who hits lefties well. He's only 3,700 as a value play. Kind of the main guys to consider at third base. Moving on to shortstop, I like Tatis a lot, but it's going to be Corey Seager for me. Getting a guy in Corey Seager who mashes right-handed pitching. Just looking at the stats for Corey Seager last year, you're getting a guy that just crushes righties, and he's in just a great ballpark to hit in against a guy that doesn't strike you out in Santella. Should put the ball in play. Does Will Corey Seager. Last year he batted .322 against right-handed pitching with 11 bombs. That was great. That was good enough for a 301 ISO, only a 50% K rate, 622 slugging. Such a great hitter in general, career-wise. Over 307 batting average against right-handed pitching. Career 217 ISO. He's been getting better over the past few years. So it's going to be Corey Seager. Going to spend up for him at the shortstop position. Shortstop is pretty loaded, so it's probably a position where I would want to spend up with either him or Tatis. You can go with Tim Anderson, mashes lefties. You have a low own like Carlos Correa, also hits lefties pretty well. I will probably spend up for them because I feel like a couple of those guys can go nuts tonight. In the outfield, we'll spend out for some Dodgers bats potentially with Bellinger, with Mookie Betts, $6,200. I'll go ahead and put him in here. Lefties and righties really well. Looking at the numbers, plate IQ for Betts here, he crushes the few pitches that Santella throws against the slider. Betts 308 ISO, throws that about 30% of the time to righties. Fastball, he hits a 305, so he has over 300 ISO against the two main pitches. If you wanted to look at the changeup, which he only throws 8% of the time, so 159 ISO, and then the curve, 109 ISO. So at least the two pitches that he throws over it like 85% of the time are the two that Mookie Betts absolutely crushes. So love him as a spend up. He's probably the favorite. Bellinger comes in as a close second. Then he can look to Robert or Robert. Either Robert or Robert. 5,300 for Robert against Heaney. His lefties really well. You have Will Myers, 49. He's expensive, but he's most definitely in play. Pollock is in play. And then it can go with some cheaper guys in the 3K range, like a Laureano at $3,600. We have Austin Slater, probably bats leadoff again against Kikuchi at $3,500. Ketel Marte, it's against Blake Snell, but he's just really cheap, $3,300 if you wanted to go with a one-off. But the second guy is going to be Tommy Pham, just because he's so cheap at $3,200. He's a guy that batted leadoff yesterday, should probably continue to do that. It's against Merrill Kelly, who does give up some contact. He struggles against some righties, give up some power against righties. If you want to look at it, Merrill Kelly's numbers, he's only been in the league for 2 years. He's been pretty good with giving up a low batting average, but he gives up some power. Last year, he actually gave up a 448 ISO, or 448 slugging against righties, 254 average, 407 xFIP, 1.60 home run per 9, and a 38% fly ball rate, 44% hard hit rate. So he does give up some hard hits to righties. And we'll look at Pham's numbers. Oops. Tommy Pham's numbers against righties. See where he's at. Just is too cheap on DraftKings. Even though I love Will Myers, there shouldn't be that much of a difference between him and Pham in terms of pricing. Last year he batted only 177. It was just 79 at bats. It's pretty anomaly. Year before that he batted 248. He's better against lefties, but he's just a little bit too cheap. So he does hit lefties better. Look at the power numbers. There does have the higher ISO against righties, which is good to see. And he does hit the ball hard against righties, 42%. So hard hit, ISO is basically similar. The average is a lot higher against lefties, but he's just a little bit too cheap at 3,200 for basically my second favorite stacking option on the board. And if you wanted to go with some 2K options, it's basically like Vaughn. You can play him in the outfield spot, or you can look to like Taylor Trammell at $2,200. So that's it for the DK side. Let's touch on FanDuel. Okay, FanDuel is basically at the pitching option. I'm just picking between Bauer and Blake Snell. They're both similarly priced. I will go with Blake Snell. You could make an argument to go to like a Pablo Lopez, or you can go down to like a Kikuchi, but I would rather just take some confidence in Blake Snell. Looking at catcher / first base, it's Bellinger, Muncy as the pay-up options here. You can look to Will Smith at only $3,400. He's cheap, and he does mash those pitches as we saw on Plate IQ. So I do like him as a guy you can save some money with. Jesus Aguilar is only $2,800. He gives you some savings there. And then Cronenworth is just $2,600. He's also cheap. So those are the main guys I'm kind of considering. We'll see where Vaughn kind of checks in at. Checks in min price $2K, so he's a guy you can look to as well. Second base, it's Max Muncy at the top end. He's a guy you can definitely pay up for at the position. He's my favorite pay-up option. You can look to potentially Gavin Lux as a 3K option. You can look to Donovan Solano as a value play. Wilmer Flores as a value play just because they hit lefties well. But Cronenworth looks appealing at only $2,600 if I was going to go cheap at the position. I will probably just plug in Bellinger right now at $4,700. And then I'll probably go with, actually, yeah, we can put Vaughn in at utility. I'll go with Vaughn at catcher first base just because he's 2K. Definitely will allow me to get up to Blake Snell and to the rest of the Dodger stack. Second base, I'll plug in Max Muncy. Third base, it's Machado at the top end. It's Justin Turner as another guy you can look to. So we're going to be stacking the Dodgers. So it's basically Machado, Turner, Rendon, Bregman as the pay-ups at the position that I'm looking at, probably in that order. And then there's not really a cheap third base option that looks that appealing except for maybe Evan Longoria. Shortstop, it's going to be Corey Seager, 45. I like him and Tatis the most at the position. You can look at Tim Anderson as well at $3,800, but I will probably get to one of those two top-end guys. You can look to Carlos Correa as a value play or a Donovan Solano as another value play, but I feel like I just can't really get myself to fade Corey Seager tonight, so he's going to be the guy that I plug in at shortstop. And then in the outfield, you can even get like Mookie Betts. It leaves it with like 2,500 left, but there are some value plays that you can plug in here. But Mookie Betts, Bellinger look like great pay-up options here. You have some value at the position with like a Taylor Trammell is $2,500. Gets you some speed on the base paths. Gets you a guy that does have ability to hit some power, but he's mainly a guy that does get on base and kind of can get some speed and some steals. Tommy Pham is $3,200. He's nicely priced on FanDuel as well. Laureano looks good at his price tag at $3K. Will Myers is only $3,000, though he's a guy that you would get to on the Padres side. Probably like to him over Tommy Pham just because on DraftKings he's like $4,700. FanDuel's only $3K. I like Justin Upton as a cheap option with some power against lefties. And then it's basically Slater as a punt play, Trammell as a punt play, Profar as a value play. And that should about do it. So I will go ahead and put in Will Myers for now. Like the price tag on him. A little bit too cheap on FanDuel. So that is it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. Best of luck for this slate. And good luck.